let's start from the beginning. I get a letter from the United States government telling me that I was invited to become a selected volunteer. The common word is a draftee, but they said you're a selected volunteer.
In the army, Mr. Green, we like the barracks nice and clean. You had a housemaid to clean your floor, but she won't help you out anymore. Do what the buglers command.
However, I intended to go into the Army Air Corps at the time. I made a pact with my two buddies who got called at the same time as I did. And we all agreed we were going to go in the Air Corps together. When we got down there, we were told that one out of every three was going to either wind up in the Marine Corps or the Navy. And the Marines had the first pick of all the recruits that were coming through that day. The Navy had second pick, and what was left went into the Army. So when I came out, I get a signal from the Navy officer to go to his table. I shook my head no. I went to the Army office table, and he said, I'm sorry, you have to go to the Navy officer. He wants you. I said, but I don't want to go into the Navy. But you have to go to him anyway. So when I went to the Navy officer, he said to me, what's wrong with the Navy? I said, nothing wrong with the Navy. He said, well, you're in the Navy now, and he stamped my... So I wound up in the Navy from 1943 to 1946. My name was Barney Leone at the time. It's still Barney Leone now. I'm 92 then. I was 18 and a half when I went into the service. And I went to boot camp. I think it was there 2 months. And then they sent me to school, to Richmond, Virginia, to study diesel engine work. And I later became a motor machinist mate. I made second class. I even actually made first class. However, when I made first class, we had a new captain, and he wanted me to stay over. I was one of the last of the original crew for my ship. My ship was called the USS Mascoma, the Navy fuel ship. We carried aviation gas. So that's my only connection with the Air Force, was the aviation gas. What I didn't understand at the time, the Navy always kept the fuel ship with aviation gas at the end of every convoy. I didn't know why. I found out why later, when the only company we had with us was the ammunition ship. So we didn't have a chance. So anyway, the captain wanted me to stay over because he lost all the experienced seamen from the ship. I was the last one to go in 1946. I said, sorry, Captain. He said he wanted me to stay with the ship to go a trip around the world from China. We were in China at the time, Shanghai. Spent 4 to 5 months in China. Well, anyway, after the bomb was dropped, we were the first ship to go into China when the bomb was dropped. And I said, I'm sorry, Captain. I said, but I'm overstaying my time now to begin with. I'm the last one of my group. I said, my parents are waiting for me to get home. I managed to go home. I'll have to turn you down. He said, well, if you refuse to go, I'm not going to sign your first class papers. But it's on my record, though, anyway. But that's my experience. Okay, now you want me to start my story. Okay, so after Richmond, Virginia, where I went to diesel school, and then they decided to send me to Camp Lejeune with the Marines. I figured, what I'm going to do there with the Marines? I'm in the Navy. It turns out that the Navy was going to train me to operate the radar equipment with the engine, diesel engine running the radar. So I'm in Camp Lejeune with the Marine Corps now. I didn't want to go with the Marine Corps. I admire them, but I decided I didn't want to go with them. Well, I endured the time there with the Marines in Camp Lejeune, and when I got back to my base, they decided to send me to New Orleans to pick up my ship in New Orleans, which was a Navy fuel ship when I got there. It was named the USS Mascoma, which is named after a river in Massachusetts. Well, the ship was built in Minnesota, and they sailed it down the Mississippi River to New Orleans. So I am one of the original crew members left. I only know one other crew member that I'm in touch with now who lives in Michigan that was with me at the time. He's a seaman, I was a motor machinist mate. I get to see him now because my daughter lives in Michigan, nearby where he lives. But 63 years later, one time he came to visit me in LA, happened to find his email address on the internet. So he came to see me. we look at our pictures there, because he was 83 at the time when he saw me after 63 years, and I was 85. But we had to look at our Navy pictures and remember who we were. Well, anyway, I get on this ship, Navy fuel ship, and we sailed from New Orleans, shakedown in the Chesapeake Bay, break the ship in, see if there was any flaws or something like that. I got injured on the ship. I lost the tip of my finger, and I go to the pharmacist mate. We didn't have a doctor. I picked up a piece of my finger to bring to him, thinking he would put it back for me. You know what he did with my tip of my finger? He threw it overboard. And so he takes a salt shaker out with sulfathiazole. They didn't have penicillin in that time, and dosed my finger up with sulfathiazole and bandaged it up. Then they sent me to Portsmouth Hospital, Naval Hospital, and the surgeon greets me, the officer, and he greets me, and he looks at my finger and he says, you know, we're probably going to have to amputate your first joint on your finger. I said, oh, no, you're not. I said, I have to type. I can't lose anything on my finger. I'm sorry, said Sailor, but if the bone is fractured, we'll have to cut it off, the first joint. Comes back about a half hour or so later. He said, you're lucky, Sailor. It's only a splinter. We'll let it go. We'll just bandage it up. I still have my finger. The fingernail grew back a little bit deformed, but I have it. Then in Pearl Harbor, I injured it again. I fell overboard in Pearl Harbor, and my finger came off again. Destiny, I guess. And I lost my hat in the process. However, I survived. Okay, our first trip out of Pearl Harbor.
Tell the hat story.
You want the hat story?
Yeah.
Okay, what I tried to do is low tide when we came back. No lights in Pearl Harbor during the war, so it was pitch black outside. When we got back, it was extremely low tide. And for me to get up on the pier to where my ship was tied up, I had to climb the canopy of my boat. And as I was doing so, I grabbed the edge of the pier to boost myself up. And lo and behold, I put pressure on my injured finger, thinking that I had to let go and land back in the boat. But I didn't realize, because I couldn't see what was below me anymore, the boat had shifted away from the pier, and in the drink I wet. And I felt my hat lift off my head, and I hear my name being called out. Barney fell overboard. I was kind of frightened because I didn't know exactly if I was going to get entangled with some debris down below, but I finally they pulled me out, and I swooshed back to the ship. Farmer's mate, he said to me, "What, again?" And rebandaged my hand. So I was working with a bandaged hand for the first part of my mission on my ship. And the first trip we had was called Christmas Island. It was such a tiny island, and we're traveling now. We thought we should find it by, I forget how long it took us to get there. We couldn't see this island. We got worried. Maybe we passed the island, it was so small. Finally, we saw one tree. That was Christmas Island. And we unloaded a lot of gasoline there for an airstrip that was there at Christmas Island. So Pearl Harbor was my home port, and we hit so many different islands. But my first initiation into combat was at Iwo Jima. It was quite a frightening thing. We pulled up, and they gave us orders to anchor, I forget how many, a couple hundred yards away from the beach. And we were told that not to do any firing whatsoever, because we were carrying aviation gas, and they didn't want us to attract fire. And the reason why they kept us so close to the beach was so that we'd be accessible to the landing craft and other ships that need gasoline to come by us. So a vivid picture that comes back to my mind. It was a cold February day. I think it was February 20th that I see this flag. I think it's February 21st, 20th, 21st in 1945. I see this flag flying at Mount Suribachi, but it was a misty day, and you couldn't see the colors of the flag. I didn't know whose flag it was to begin with. As a matter of fact, I didn't even suspect it would be our flag, because the Marines were just landing at the time, and I think they can climb this mountain so easily. However, before the Marines even landed on that island, for a whole week in my ship's presence, we bombed that island, and I never saw so many bombs hit an island that was only 6 miles long. I thought the island would sink with all the bombing that would take place. However, what we didn't know at the time, that the Japanese had a tunnel from one end of the island to the other end of the island, and also in Mount Suribachi they were well secured inside the caves. We found out later they even had elevators in those caves. So all during the bombing, we didn't see any Japanese on the land at all. However, when the first wave of Marines came in, and when they hit the beach, the second wave was in the water, suddenly the whole island became alive. And all the Japanese came out of their holds and attacked the first Marines from behind and the second Marines that were at the beach at the time. Now my ship was one of the last ships that the Marines would pass by before hitting the beach. So those of us that were topside, my gun position was on the bridge, starboard side of the bridge at 20 millimeter, but I was on the phones giving instructions to the gunners. Here come these boatload landing craft full of Marines. I'm looking at their faces, and what I saw was very touching. We were waving to them, to wishing them well, we'd give them the thumbs up sign, and you know what? Now one of them waved back to us. I'm looking at their faces, and this is what I saw. Every Marine holding their rifle real tight up against their chin. No expression on their face except it looked frightened to me. And after seeing all that bombing in there, I thought I'd be frightened too if I was on a landing craft. And I'm trying to think as what's going through their mind as we were waving to them and they didn't wave back to us. And you know what came to my mind? You sailors are lucky. You're staying put, anchored, and we're going in. And the flashback comes to my mind as I speak to you now. Some of those same Marines that didn't wave back to us and we waved to them, some of them came floating back out. They didn't even make the beach. And my hat's off to every Marine now, because even though I was a sailor in the United States Navy, those Marines went in. And we watched them go in, and we watched them die. And so I feel obligated now. I don't consider myself to be a World War II hero. I consider myself to be a World War II survivor, because the real heroes in my eyes are those Marines that went in and lost their lives. And since they can't come back and talk to us, I feel commissioned to, and my mission now is to talk in their behalf. And you know what's even sad? Some of those Marines now, even though they were born here in the United States, are not even buried where they were born. Some were buried where they fell, some were buried at sea, and some were never found. That's the sacrifice they made for us, myself included, to enjoy the freedom that we are now experiencing here. Now, I know of no veteran who wanted to die, myself included, but every one of us was willing to die if that was going to be required of us to give our life to preserve our freedom. And so that's why I'm here now, to this very day, talking about it. Now, when I saw the flag go up at Iwo Jima, on Mount Suribachi, finally with my binoculars, I see the stars and stripes. I got all excited and chills went up and down. And I said to my shipmate, "Hey, that's our flag up there. It's our flag." Some of the guys were talking on the ship about hoping that we'd get some Japanese souvenir, but that didn't enter my mind. When I saw Old Glory flying on Mount Suribachi, I happened to turn around and look at the flag that was flying on the mast of my ship. I said, I want a souvenir from my ship. I'm going to ask for and get the flag from my ship. Now, ordinarily, the flag would be flying on our ship when it would get weather beaten. We change the flag, and they take the flag down and burn it and put a new flag up. So after Okinawa, I went over to the quartermaster and I said, by the way, when you pull a flag down, would you do me a favor and save that flag for me? I want it as a souvenir. And he said to me, sure, Barney, you have it. So sometime later, when he pulled the flag down, he gave me the flag. I put the flag in my locker, never talked about it to anybody. When I came home 3 years later after the war was over, I took that flag and I put it in my closet, never talked about it. We never even talked about World War II. It's only been lately in these last few years now, people are questioning us about World War II. So I was living in New York when I was going into the service. I'm a New York native. Then I went to Ohio to pastor a church in Ohio. And then when I came to California here, my daughter lived here. She wanted me to live close by. My wife was sick at the time. And we came here. But when I was in Ohio, my daughter was in kindergarten, and she said, Dad, do you have something I could bring to school for show and tell? I thought about my flag. I said, here, take this flag. And I wrote a note for the teacher to understand what that flag stood for. I gave it to my daughter. She took it to school. When she came home, I said, well, what did your teacher say? The teacher said nothing. She just looked at the flag and said not a word. I said, really? Well, you should see the response I get now when I show that American flag. If that flag could only speak, you know how many Marines passed under the flag of my ship that never came back? That flag can tell you more than I can tell you. And that's why that flag is so meaningful to me, and every time I show it, I get a good response. It's tattered, it's torn, but it's the American flag that was flying, that Marines and sailors and soldiers died to give us the freedom that we have today. Well, they realized by then that they were losing the war. And so in Okinawa, we were faced with kamikazes you wouldn't believe. And suddenly this kamikaze was coming towards my ship, right to my bridge position. I see this kamikaze diving at us. There's nothing you could do but pray. And before it reached my ship, it went down. So my captain signals to the other captain to thank him for shooting the plane down. He signals back to my captain. I remember the words that we got. Hell no! We were firing to cover the Marines going in, and he crossed the line of fire by accident. I said to myself, he called it an accident, I called it an act of God. Oh, the two photos, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
Okay, I have a photo of my dad here who was in World War I, and is 20 years of age in this picture I have here. And that picture of him was hanging in my home as a kid. And he never talked too much about the war. I did know some of his stories. Well, anyway, I didn't realize at the time when I took my own photograph, I was 20 years of age like my dad, and I'm almost taking the same identical pose. So now I carry it with me all over I go, and I show it to everybody, and everybody's amazed by that. And they see the marked resemblance between my dad. I don't see what they see, but so I'm proud to show that picture now. By the way, he got the Purple Heart.